Ha llegado la hora del terror. El reloj marca la medianoche, la hora más temida por aquellos que conocen las verdaderas pesadillas. Aquí, cada minuto que pasa te arrastra más profundamente hacia un universo dominado por horrores indescriptibles y terrores sin nombre. Las historias que escucharás romperán todas las barreras de tu imaginación, atrapándote en un ciclo infinito de miedo. No intentes huir. Esta hora es inevitable y el terror que despierta te seguirá por siempre. Through the warped reflection of the rear view, the motel's vacancy sign pulsed, a dying neon heart against the obsidian canvas of the highway. I eased the car onto the empty ribbon of asphalt, the silence within amplifying the nervous energy radiating from my passenger. A gaunt figure crowned with a tangle of beard, whose name he'd offered was Elias. Picking up strays of the road was habit, almost ritual, but this one resonated like a discordant chord, setting a vibration deep in my bones. A simple gesture of goodwill, I'd thought, unaware it was the first step onto a precipice overlooking a night carved from nightmare. A plunge that would demand every shred of instinct I possessed. Silas, that's the name I answer to. A decade now, I've been a nomad tethered only to the ceaseless hum of tires on pavement. The allure is elemental, the infinite perspective lines of the highway, landscapes dissolving and reforming like dreams, the quiet promise whispered by each approaching curve. Strange orbits I've intersected out here, yes, sights that linger behind the eyelids. But nothing in that sprawling catalogue of miles had calibrated me for the events spooling out under that particular moon. Midnight had bled into the subsequent hour. Hours sunk into the hypnotic drone of the engine, the desert stretching out, immense and indifferent. Fatigue pressed heavy, a physical weight against my eyelids, the thermos of lukewarm coffee, a poor defense. Then, a silhouette against the starlight, solitary, thumb starkly extended, a flicker of doubt, the lateness, the profound isolation. Yet the figure seemed unassuming, and I knew that posture, the vulnerability of the stranded, the profound relief a slowing pair of headlights could ignite. I braked, the tires whispering on the shoulder, letting the passenger window descend. Destination. My voice felt loud in the stillness. Just a stretch further, he rasped, the words coated in disuse. Name's Elias. I offered mine, thumbed the lock. He folded himself into the seat, bringing with him an aroma of stale perspiration mingled with an unidentifiable metallic tang. Road grime, I reasoned, dismissing the prickle of unease as I merged back onto the blacktop. Silence settled between us, thick and expectant, punctuated only by the tire song and the low thrum of some distant radio station. Tentative questions about origins and destinations met curt, deflected responses. Elias seemed less interested in sharing than in gathering. Sharp inquiries about my chosen route, the last time fuel had kissed the tank. Mile after desolate mile, unspooled, the feeling of wrongness solidified, refusing to dissipate. Elias's hands resting on his knees betrayed a fine tremor. His gaze kept snapping to the side mirror, a hunted quality in the darting motion. "Everything all right?" I ventured, aiming for nonchalance. "Seem a little tense." His entire frame went rigid. Fine, he bit out, the word sharp-edged. Just drive. The air in the cabin grew dense, charged with unspoken anxieties. Regret began to bloom, a cold flower in my gut. But ejection wasn't an option. We were adrift in a sea of sagebrush and shadow. That's when the pulsing strobes materialized in the mirror, red and blue, painting the interior in frantic flashes. A patrol car. Relief surged, potent and immediate. Authority, order. Whatever coil Elias was wound in, surely this would unwind it. But as my foot eased towards the brake, his hand clamped onto my arm, fingers digging in with startling force. "Don't stop!" The hiss was pure panic, eyes wide and feral. "You stop! We're both finished!" My pulse hammered against my ribs. "What? It's the police!" A laugh tore from him, devoid of humor, brittle as glass. "That's no police car. Believe me. Drive." Against the screaming insistence of logic, my foot slammed the accelerator. The pursuing vehicle surged in response, its siren erupting into a piercing wail. "What in God's name is happening?" I demanded, knuckles-white constellations on the steering wheel. Elias fumbled inside his worn jacket, producing the flat, undeniable shape of a handgun. Ice water cascaded through my veins. "Explanations later," he stated, voice tight. "Right now, lose them." My reality fractured. Kindness, a simple roadside courtesy, had detonated into this chaos. But the cold metal glinting in the dim cabin light, the relentless pursuer, choice felt like a distant luxury. I floored it, the engine screaming its protest as we devoured the highway. What followed was a fugue state of terror and velocity. We tore through the night at speeds that blurred the landscape into streaks, the phantom cruiser glued to our wake. Elias barked directions, sudden swerves onto barely there dirt tracks, blind corners taken on faith and adrenaline. Time lost all meaning, subsumed by the desperate focus of keeping rubber on road, of outrunning the relentless lights. Eventually, miraculously, after an eternity compressed into frantic minutes, the lights vanished. I wrenched the car onto a forgotten shoulder, the silence deafening after the engine's roar. My hands shook violently. Killing the ignition felt like a monumental task. "Okay," I breathed, turning to face him. "Answers. Now." Elias remained still for a long beat, the gun still clutched, though his tremor matched my own. Then haltingly, the words came. A narrative so baroque, so steeped in paranoia, I'd have dismissed it as delusion had the high-octane chase not just scorched itself into my memory. He spoke of being a government insider, stumbling upon a conspiracy vast and deeply rooted. The pursuers, he claimed, were operatives of a clandestine entity woven into the very fabric of power. "They're everywhere," he whispered, eyes scanning the empty darkness beyond the windshield. "Local cops, feds, trust no one. I have proof. Enough to shatter everything. They won't let that proof see daylight." I sat, absorbing the impossible. Part of my mind screamed fiction, yet the phantom siren still echoed. "So," I heard myself ask, my voice unnervingly steady, "what's the plan?" Elias consulted his watch, brow furrowed. "Keep moving. Contact rendezvous. Few hours out. Make it there. We might have a chance. Options warred within me. Flee? With a gun inches away and faceless, lethal pursuers potentially still hunting. Unwise. And if by some terrifying chance he was telling the truth, I was already neck deep. Might as well swim for the far shore. We slipped back into the current of the road, favoring the veins of secondary routes, a shared vigilance humming between us. Elias's paranoia proved contagious. Every approaching headlight became a potential threat. Every night sound a prelude to capture. Dawn began to paint the eastern horizon in bruised purples and tentative pinks as we entered a small, anonymous town. Elias directed me towards a motel clinging to the frayed edge of the settlement, its paint peeling like sunburnt skin. "Wait here," he commanded, unfolding himself from the car. "Need to make the call." I watched him vanish into a room numbered crudely on a faded door. Minutes stretched, taut and elastic, hardening into an hour. A knot of wrongness tightened in my stomach. Impulse overriding caution, I eased out of the car, moving with quiet steps towards the designated room. Closer, I caught voices, Elias's, strained, and another sharp with menace. "You brought a civilian?" the unknown voice hissed, incredulous. "Are you compromised?" "Had no choice," Elias countered. "He knows nothing essential. I'll handle it." My blood turned to frost. Trust had been a fool's currency. I pivoted, intending to dissolve back into the pre-dawn shadows, but a hand seized my shoulder, spinning me around. I was staring into the dark eye of Elias's pistol. "Sorry," he murmured, and the apology sounded unnervingly genuine. "You heard too much." Time fractured, stretched thin. Fragments of my life flickered, highways unspooled, faces met and forgotten, the sheer texture of existence. An abrupt visceral refusal to let it end here surged through me. Desperation lent strength I didn't know I possessed. My fist shot out, connecting solidly with his jaw. He staggered, the impact jarring the weapon. A gunshot cracked the morning air, the bullet screaming past my ear. No hesitation, I ran. Pure, unthinking flight propelled me, lungs burning, heart a frantic drum against my ribs. Shouts echoed behind, the slap of pursuing feet on pavement. But this terrain, these forgotten capillaries of America, I knew them. Through alleys slick with yesterday's rain, over collapsing fences, ducking through the skeletal remains of abandoned stores. The sounds of pursuit gradually receded, swallowed by the awakening town. Still I ran, until the vast expanse of the main highway opened before me. A semi-truck, a lumbering behemoth, crested the horizon. Blind luck, or perhaps the road's strange providence. I flagged it down, surely a spectacle of wild eyes and ragged breath. The driver, a woman whose face held the map of years and kindness, assessed me in a single glance and swung the passenger door wide. "Trouble, honey?" she asked, her voice calm as I scrambled aboard. A breathless nod was my only reply. She didn't pry, just engaged the gears, pulling us away from the town, away from Elias and the shadows clinging to him. As the miles accumulated, distance buffering me from the motel and the gun, relief mingled with a persistent tremor of fear. The certainty settled that I'd be glancing over my shoulder for a long time, scanning horizons for threats unseen. Yet as the adrenaline subsided, replaced by a profound weariness, a different understanding surfaced. The terror had been absolute, yes, but it had also unearthed a resilience within me, a resourcefulness, a fierce tenacity for survival I hadn't recognized before. The open road, my constant companion, had always promised the unexpected. It had delivered, brutally and unequivocally. Picking up strangers might be off the table for a while, but the call remained. Because beyond the reach of hidden agendas and desperate men, the asphalt still stretched, infinite with potential. I was still breathing, still moving, still chasing that receding line where sky met earth. The rising sun ignited the clouds, a breathtaking blaze of orange and rose. A new day, hard won. Whatever lay beyond the next curve, whatever challenges waited in the miles ahead, I would meet them. I had survived, and the road, with all its inherent perils and breathtaking beauty, was still singing my name. The precise instant the wrongness began is etched in my memory. I just wrestled the projector into position, the centerpiece of my nascent backyard cinema. Standing before the blank canvas of the screen, anticipation thrumming, I surveyed my handiwork. Dusk bled across the sky. The neighborhood held its breath. The projector's power button, a smooth plastic dome, yielded under my thumb. I braced for the clean digital whir of initiation. What came instead was a violent, momentary crackle hiss, the ghost sound of brittle film skipping over sprockets. A mere second, yet enough to send a jolt through my pulse. Just startup static, I told myself, shrugging it off, though no digital device I knew ever announced itself quite like that. An anomaly I chose then not to probe. Perhaps some context is needed for this backyard projection obsession. 2 months prior, the notion seized me. Transform the humble outbuilding, what some call a shed, but we often term an edicula, into a private sanctuary for moving pictures. Being a devotee of cinema, I craved an ambiance steeped in nostalgia. I sourced a digital projector meticulously designed with a retro shell, mimicking the hulking apparatuses of old. Reviews lauded its performance. The price didn't wound. The allure was potent. Vintage aesthetics fused with contemporary technology. Its arrival felt like unearthing a peculiar treasure. That inaugural evening, cables snaked from my laptop like electronic vines. A makeshift table held sustenance. Lights were killed. I launched a brief film clip. The projector flared to life, bathing the screen in expected light. For a handful of seconds, normalcy reigned. Then, the image quavered. Not the pixelated stutter of a digital hiccup, but an authentic celluloid tremble reminiscent of archival newsreels. A high-definition file streamed from a modern machine had no business mimicking 35mm decay. Pausing the playback, I traced connections. HDMI firmly seated, power cord snug. All secure. I resumed the clip. Smooth playback ensued for perhaps a minute before the spectral flicker returned, accompanied this time by a faint, dry rustling, like static whispering from an ancient wireless set. Halt the video. Silence. Restart. A minute's grace. Then the rustle resurfaced. I rose, moved closer, scanning the lens for imperfections. Coinciding precisely with each flicker, the projector's internal fan altered its pitch, modulating from a steady drone to a higher, strained whine. Simultaneously, a distinct current of air brushed my skin. I spun, expecting an open window, a forgotten draft. The window, however, remained resolutely shut, the latch tight. The air wasn't frigid, but it carried an inexplicable chill that raised gooseflesh on my arms. Annoyance warred with bafflement. I found myself repeatedly verifying the window lock, a futile ritual confirming its steadfast seal. Over the subsequent days, I practiced willful ignorance. Short test clips ran, chair arrangements shifted. The flicker and static manifested erratically, brief enough to avoid total disruption, persistent enough to sow doubt about the machine's integrity. A firmware gremlin, perhaps? Then about a week into this uneasy cohabitation, a more profound disturbance occurred. I was immersed in a classic monochrome film. 20 minutes flowed seamlessly. Suddenly the screen blinked into absolute black. Audio vanished from the speakers. Into the abrupt vacuum flooded the distinct rhythmic clatter of spinning film reels, impossibly close, as if an old kinemacolor was operating just behind my chair. I whirled around. Empty space greeted me, but the air had turned bitingly cold, a precipitous temperature drop that felt utterly unnatural. No visible breath, yet the chill was visceral. I stood frozen, breath held captive. As swiftly as it had died, the projector reignited. The film resumed from its exact point of interruption, though the image now bore a faint, persistent stutter. Rooted to the spot, I waited, muscles coiled. After 15 agonizing seconds, the stutter dissolved. The movie played on. I sank back into my seat, yet a peculiar tension lingered in my chest. My body braced for an unseen encore. From that night onward, every session within the edicula felt charged. The static would erupt without preamble, sometimes interwoven with a hushed susurrus, low, indistinct, like a voice murmuring at the very threshold of perception. Attempting to focus on it inevitably caused its retreat. Whenever I paused the stream or stepped away from the projector's beam, gooseflesh would prickle my arms as a sudden, cool zephyr materialized from nowhere, untraceable to any vent or aperture. I began scrutinizing the walls for hairline cracks, inspecting the floorboards for hidden gaps. Nothing accounted for these pockets of cold. The house's climate control didn't extend here. No vents existed to channel such swift thermal shifts. At one stage, convinced of an invisible breach, I replaced the window seals entirely. It yielded no change. Each nocturnal test brought the inevitable return of the flicker and that phantom chill. One evening resolved me. Meticulous documentation was required. I would conduct controlled tests, log the projector's behavior, note every aberration. A simple white test pattern illuminated the screen. Notepad poised, I settled in, chronicling the mundane details. For 10 minutes, perfection. Then the screen shivered. The faint crackle returned. I noted it down. Seconds later, the cold enveloped me. The pages of my notepad stirred, lifted by an ephemeral gust. I rose, circled the small structure, re-verified doors and windows, sealed tight. The flicker persisted. The static swelled briefly, then faded. Returning to my seat, I fought for composure. As I sat, a low murmur seemed to press against my left ear, a deep, guttural utterance like someone speaking intimately close yet forming only half-articulated syllables. My scalp prickled, my heart hammered against my ribs. The sound vanished in less than 2 breaths. I scanned the empty room, alone. Yet the air felt dense, occupied. A surge of anger at the sheer absurdity of my reaction coursed through me. Rationality warred with the undeniable sensation. I switched off the projector, rose, and walked out subconsciously reining in my runaway thoughts. The following morning, under the impartial gaze of daylight, I reran the same test pattern. Utterly flawless. No flicker, no static, no chill. Even with the overhead lights extinguished to mimic nocturnal gloom, the projector behaved impeccably. Was it some peculiar atmospheric effect tied to nighttime temperature drops? Interference from obscure electronics? My neighborhood was placid, electronically quiet. The only variable seemed to be the profound silence of night, perhaps amplifying stray noises. But that failed utterly to explain the cold. The next night I introduced a small electric heater, determined to maintain a stable warmth. Projector on, movie playing, heater humming its counter melody. 15 minutes of blissful normalcy passed. The room stayed cozy, the image steady. Then abruptly, the static popped. The flicker returned, and the heater's fan audibly slowed, faltering as if starved of power. Listening intently through the electronic interference, I caught it again, that deep, resonant voice. A single, low phrase, indecipherable, a name, perhaps. The entire setup was immediately shut down. I didn't want to linger. My hands trembled as I disconnected the cables. That night I exited the edicula swiftly, locking the door firmly behind me. In the weeks that followed, solo viewings ceased. I invited my friend, Samir, over one Saturday afternoon for a short film screening. In the broad light of day, everything performed without a hitch. No spectral flickers, no phantom sounds, no invasive chill. Samir chuckled when I recounted the nocturnal strangeness, attributing it to overwork with amiable skepticism. I laughed along, a hollow echo of his mirth. Later that same evening, solitude regained. I tried again. Predictably, within minutes of the movie starting, the flicker and static announced their return. The familiar cold crept across my shoulders, tightening the muscles in my back. I forced myself to remain resolute, observing. The audio intermittently cut out, supplanted by that uncanny whirring of antique reels. The cold currents ebbed and flowed. I feigned nonchalance, but focus shattered. Each flicker was a neurological jolt. Each burst of static tightened my shoulders like a vice. When the low whisper brushed past my ear again, I nearly leaped from the chair. "Hello?" I ventured, my voice thin, unsteady. "Who's there?" Silence answered, save for the faintest retreating sigh. A dry, raspy exhalation that seemed to originate directly behind me. I spun, finding only empty air. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs, loud enough, it seemed, to echo in the small space. I fled, hitting the power switch on my way out. Eyes locked on the door, not even pausing to coil the wires. Escape was paramount. Back within the mundane safety of my house, relief washed over me. The steady temperature, the familiar quiet, sanctuary. I sat, attempting to dismantle the experience with logic. A manufacturing defect? Faulty shed wiring? But the cold, the voice? Power tools had lived out there for years without incident. Lights never flickered, drafts never materialized. Something shifted fundamentally when the projector arrived. Thoughts turned to returning it, selling it off. The inconsistency, the night-bound nature of the phenomena, made proving a defect unlikely. And a part of me, stubbornly, still cherished the concept of my retro-inspired cinema. I clung to the belief that I could isolate the cause, implement a fix. Yet each evening, the prospect of entering the shed instilled a creeping dread. The moment I crossed the threshold, I'd brace involuntarily for that wave of cold. My stomach would clench. My palms grew damp. This was the antithesis of the cozy escape I'd envisioned. Eventually, a compromise was struck. No more solitary nighttime screenings. Daytime or late afternoon became the only acceptable windows. The phenomena never intruded during these hours. Still, the adicular itself felt subtly altered, even in sunlight. Occasionally a flicker would dance at the periphery of my vision, a ghostly reminder. I disassembled everything multiple times. Lens cleaned, firmware updated, furniture rearranged. Futile gestures. The strangeness reliably returned with nocturnal solitude. Recently I hosted a small group. We watched a film starting around 6, concluding near 8. No problems. But mere moments after the last guest departed, I impulsively tested it alone. Within 5 minutes, the image wavered, accompanied by that familiar, icy gust. It lasted perhaps 10 seconds, then vanished. It felt reactive, almost, aware of my solitude. Denial is no longer sustainable. This transcends hardware glitches. Something transpires in that adicular after dark, inextricably linked to this projector. Thinking on it now, my hands grow clammy, my breath quickens. The memory of that deep whisper retains a terrifying immediacy. I possess no grand theory, only the unsettling reality of the experience. It's palpable enough to make my skin crawl. Some nights I stand at my kitchen window, gazing at the dark silhouette of the shed, debating another test. Then the visceral memory returns, the gut-twisting anxiety, the static hiss, the voice that felt inches from my ear. The projector currently sits dormant, unplugged, its cables sequestered in a box, a self-imposed exile. If films are watched out there, it will be with company, and strictly before twilight descends. I begun browsing for a new projector, something aggressively modern, devoid of nostalgic pretense. Perhaps replacement is the cure. Yet a nagging apprehension remains. Has the adicular itself been altered? Has something anchored itself to that space? Certainty eludes me. Proof is non-existent. All I know is the weight that settles in my chest at the mere thought of powering up that machine after sunset. My cinematic dream has curdled into low-grade anxiety. For now, the shed remains dark when night falls. I'll confine my viewing to the predictable glow of the television indoors. Let the flicker and the whispers keep their nocturnal vigil alone. The afternoon wept rain when Elias reached the sepulchral edifice. Above, the sky hung like wet slate, and a wind sharp as chipped ice bit at his face. His shoulders bore only a slight burden, a knapsack containing a slim notebook, a torch, provisions enough for a few hours. The bulk of his gear remained locked in the car's sanctuary. Gnarled trees, skeletal in the downpour, stood sentinel around the manse that terminated the long, sodden drive. Its walls were leprous with peeling paint. Its windows stared, vacant and dark voids. He'd come chasing phantoms of inspiration, hoping this place, whispered to be unquiet by the townsfolk, might stir the embers for his next novel. The porch steps groaned their ancient protest as he ascended. Beneath his ribs, a frantic drummer took up residence. A peculiar fizzing sensation stirred low in his gut. Finding the great front door unlatched, nudged open by decay or design, he pushed. It rasped across the unseen floor, a sound like dragging stone. Decay's breath, thick with damp timber and the ghosts of old textiles, rushed to meet him. Elias paused in the cavernous foyer, letting his vision bleed into the gloom. Vaulted ceilings soared into shadow, flanked to the left by a staircase whose balustrade gaped with missing teeth. Motes of dust performed a slow ballet in the thin light. Somewhere deeper within the house's bowels, water wept, a steady, echoing drip. He thumbed his torch, alive. Its beam sliced the darkness, illuminating strips of hanging wallpaper like flayed skin and a gallery of ancestral portraits. Their painted eyes were stern, yet time had blurred their features into indistinct smudges. Each forward step Elias took drew a tortured groan from the floorboards beneath his boots. His pulse surged, a frantic rhythm against the profound quiet that amplified every minute sound. He fought to regulate his breath. Method was his shield against unease. Starting with the foyer, he scanned the walls, wrenched open a small resisting cabinet, discovering only a solitary, dust-filmed glass bottle. He let it fall. It chimed briefly against the wood. A nervous energy thrummed through him. The constant expectation of some peripheral flicker, some shape coalescing in the corners. Still he pressed onward, turning right into what might have once been a drawing room. The air here was stagnant, heavy with the scent of brittle paper and rot. Heavy drapery, thick with grime, choked the two large windows, admitting only slivers of the weeping day. The torchlight swept across a divan, spilling its innards, a low table furred with dust, and shelves burdened with books. He traced the spines, forgotten novels, ledgers bound in worn leather. One journal yielded to his touch. Flipping through its brittle pages revealed mundane chronicles, notes on domestic labor, mentions of callers, crude sketches of the grounds. No tremor of hidden tragedy, no key to the house's rumored disquiet. Then a soft concussion from the floor above. Elias froze, a statue carved from apprehension. His torch beam shot upwards, painting a circle on the stained ceiling plaster. Silence stretched, taut and expectant. His heart hammered a frantic Morse code against his ribs. He waited. Nothing more. An animal, he reasoned, a settling of the old bones of the house. Yet the unease lingered, a cold residue. He had to know. Retreating to the foyer, he faced the wounded staircase. Each tread felt precarious, emitting a low, complaining creak under his weight. The upper landing swam in near-total darkness, save for the weak, gray luminescence filtering through a fractured window pane at the corridor's far end. A bitter tang, reminiscent of aged varnish, stung his nostrils. A narrow passage stretched before him, lined with closed doors. His footsteps echoed unnervingly, hollow raps in the confined space. He swept the torch beam left, then right, scrutinizing each portal. His pulse maintained its frantic tempo. His mouth felt stuffed with cotton. Reaching the first door on the right, he paused, straining to hear. Silence. He grasped the handle. It resisted, then yielded with a protracted groan. Inside, a compact bedchamber. Cracks mapped the walls like crazed tributaries. The bedstead lay splintered. A lone chair, draped in dust like a funeral shroud, listed against the wall. The air smelled faintly of time-desiccated linen. A faint, papery rustle whispered from a corner. Elias held his breath, snapping the torch beam towards the sound. Empty space. The rustling ceased. He backed out slowly, pulling the door closed behind him. He continued his passage down the corridor. Perspiration beaded on his brow despite the chill air. A tremor started in his hands. He clenched them, forcing a semblance of calm. He passed another closed door, and another. The final door on the left stood slightly ajar. As he approached, a flicker, swift as thought, a shadow perhaps, darted across the sliver of visible space beyond. His heart leapt. He reached for the handle, his grip slick with sweat, fumbling for purchase. Steeling himself, he pushed the door wide. A study, it seemed. A desk commanded the far wall, flanked by a bookshelf. Thick drapes veiled the window. Stale air, yes, but laced with the faint phantom scent of pipe tobacco. The floor lay strewn with drifts of paper. Elias stepped within, the torch beam questing across the desk. Scattered letters lay there, beside a small lamp, its bulb shattered. He leaned closer, drawn to an open letter. The script was hurried. I keep hearing someone downstairs. The doors open and close, but I find no one. A single sentence, yet it sent an icy frisson crawling up his spine, perfectly mirroring the disquiet that had dogged him since crossing the threshold. Another sound, this time from the hallway he'd just vacated. A slow, frictional drag, like something heavy being pulled across the floorboards. His chest constricted. Laying the letter aside, he moved to the doorway, projecting the torch beam into the waiting darkness. The corridor offered only emptiness, yet the palpable sensation of being observed prickled his skin. Eyes unseen tracked his movements. He stood motionless, listening intently. Only the incessant drip from below and the moan of the wind answered. The fine hairs on his arms lifted. He decided to break the silence, his voice emerging thin and reedy. "Hello? Is anyone here?" The question hung in the thick air, then dissolved, unanswered. He backed slowly out of the study, considering his next move. Another room, perhaps, or a retreat downstairs for air. Turning to face the corridor fully, his gaze caught movement near the stairwell's head. A transient blurring, an indistinct shape dissolving as quickly as it formed. He blinked, stabbing the torch beam towards it, but there was nothing. Nausea churned in his stomach as adrenaline surged. He forced his legs to move forward, each bootfall on the creaking floor sounding unnaturally loud, each step heavier than the last. At the top of the stairs, he peered down into the foyer. It seemed altered in the deepening gloom. Was that whispering he heard? Faint susurrations, too low to decipher, seemed to rise from the shadows. His pulse hammered in his ears. His breathing grew rapid and shallow. The torch beam danced wildly, seeking a source, finding only dust motes, peeling paint, the battered sentinel of the front door. Retreat felt sensible, yet the house exerted a strange pull, a siren song promising revelation. He had to plumb its depths. He descended the stairs, each step echoing in the charged silence. A wave of dizziness washed over him. He clung to the banister, pressing onward. Reaching the ground floor, he directed his light towards a rear hallway. The kitchen lay that way, he surmised, or perhaps pantries, a cellar. Local lore mentioned both. Elias navigated the passage. Here the wallpaper hung in ragged strips, and the pervasive odor shifted, acquiring a sour, mildewed undertone. His heart thumped a heavy cadence against his ribs. His shoulders remained rigid with tension. The hallway terminated at a door leading into a vast kitchen. He stepped across the threshold. Counters lay buried under dust and fallen plaster. By the window, a sink wept rust-colored tears. Decrepit pots and pans were strewn across a central wooden table like battlefield casualties. A sudden scuttling betrayed the presence of unseen occupants. Rats, likely. Elias swallowed against a rising gorge and ventured deeper. Chairs stood sentinel around the table, one overturned in seeming haste. Beside a pantry, he spied a narrower door, the cellar entrance. His torch beam revealed worn steps spiraling down into absolute blackness. A current of air flowed up, cool and damp, smelling of raw earth and advanced decay. He hesitated, a knot of apprehension tightening within him. Yet an insistent curiosity, a need to know, propelled him forward. His foot met the first step, cold stone, unevenly worn. His breathing hitched as he descended, the torch carving a small circle of light from the oppressive dark. Each step seemed to groan under his weight. He half expected one to crumble. Downward he went, the beam tracing the rough-hewn stone walls. Finally, the packed earth floor of the cellar. The ceiling pressed low, forcing him into a slight stoop. Crates loomed like sarcophagi, alongside barrels and rickety shelves lined with glass jars. Most were empty. A few held dark, unidentifiable masses, preserved horrors from decades past. The stench thickened, cloying and foul. He recoiled. Methodically, he began sweeping the light along the walls, searching for hidden alcoves, concealed passages. Cobwebs and dust were his only reward. Then behind him, a distinct scraping, the sound of a foot dragging through the dirt. He whirled, torch beams slashing through the dark. Nothing. His pulse leapt, frantic now. A bead of sweat traced a cold path down his temple. He swallowed, struggling for composure, his thoughts scattering like startled birds. Was his mind fabricating these terrors? He clung to facts. A sound heard, nothing seen. The cellar was confining. Hiding places were few. Yet the feeling of being watched intensified, a physical pressure. His hand trembled, the torch beam jittering. He began backing towards the stairs, his heart pounding with painful intensity. And then from the periphery of his vision, a shape drifting across the cellar's far end. Pale, ephemeral, little more than a distortion in the darkness. He jerked the light towards it. Gone. A vice clamped around his chest. Pure, unadulterated fear surged through him. He bolted, taking the stairs two at a time, the noise of his flight echoing upwards. Back in the relative safety of the kitchen, he slammed the cellar door, the sound unnaturally loud in the stillness. His breath came in ragged gasps. His legs felt like water. He leaned heavily against the wall, pressing his forehead against the cool, peeling paper, closing his eyes against the lingering image. The house felt vibrant now, teeming with unseen movement, whispering with sounds that defied explanation. He fought for control, reminding himself of his purpose: research, material for a story. But he felt less the detached observer, more the terrified trespasser caught in a hostile domain. He decided to return to the foyer, to regroup, to think. Leaving felt imperative, yet the lure of the unsolved mystery held him fast. Slowly, he retraced his steps through the back hallway, his torch beam probing every shadow. Each creak of the ancient structure, each sigh of the wind outside, snagged at his frayed nerves. As he neared the foyer, the whispering resumed. Faint, yet insistent, a sibilant chorus rising and falling just beyond the threshold of comprehension. He swept the torch beam around the vast space. Dust motes danced, shadows clung to corners, but nothing moved. He swallowed, the sound loud in his own ears. His chest tightened painfully. A sudden immense pressure descended, making each breath a labor. His temples throbbed. Again, movement near the staircase, a fleeting impression of something gliding across the upper landing. He directed the light upwards. Nothing. The frantic drumming in his ears nearly drowned out thought. The air felt thick, suffocating. Primal instinct screamed. Danger. He stumbled forward, propelled by fear towards the front door. His hand, slick and trembling, fumbled for the knob. He turned it, poised for escape, but an irresistible compulsion made him glance back one last time. The torch beam sliced through the foyer's gloom. There, nestled in the shadows at the base of the stairs, he saw it. A shape, hunched and indistinct, present for a heartbeat, then utterly gone. His breath hitched. A wave of pure dread washed over him. He wrenched the door open and plunged out onto the porch. The cool impact of the rain on his face was a shock. He gasped, sucking in damp air. His heart still hammered violently. His clothes clung, clammy with sweat. Panting, he stood frozen, shining the torch back through the open doorway. The interior lay silent, inert, as if the preceding terrors had merely been fevered dreams dissolving back into the gloom. But the tightness in his chest remained, the unnerving certainty of unseen eyes. Escape beckoned, yet curiosity, the writer's curse, gnawed at him. He had barely breached the surface. What other rooms lay hidden? What documents? What definitive proof lay waiting to give his novel its chilling authenticity? Shadows and whispers warred in his mind. He weighed the impulse to flee against the hunger for the story. Finally, opting for a tactical retreat, he decided to take refuge in the car, to breathe, to think. He trudged off the porch, his boots squelching in the mud, churned up by the relentless rain. The torch beam skittered across glistening leaves. Wind sighed through the high branches, a mournful chorus. His body remained coiled tight, his pulse a frantic drum beat against the rain's soft percussion. Reaching the car felt like reaching a distant shore. He was soaked through, hair plastered to his forehead, jacket heavy with absorbed water. He slid behind the wheel but didn't immediately engage the engine. He focused on drawing slow, deep breaths. His hands still shook. His mind churned, replaying the sounds, the fleeting glimpses, the crushing weight of the atmosphere. Had fear painted phantoms onto the canvas of decay? Had isolation birthed auditory hallucinations? Yet the dragging sound, the whispers, the letter, those felt real, tangible anchors in a sea of dread. After several minutes, the frantic pounding in his chest began to subside. He retrieved his notebook, compelled to document the experience while it remained raw. He scribbled furiously, the sequence of sounds, the nature of the shapes, the chilling words in the letter, the cellar's fouetted breath, the oppressive quality of the air. As he wrote, a profound chill, unrelated to the rain, seeped into his bones. He realized he was shivering violently. He started the engine briefly, letting the heater blast warm air over his frigid hands, then cut it, wary of the battery. He stared back at the dark mass of the mansion. The windows remained blank, inscrutable eyes, yet he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, expecting a pale face to bloom in one of the panes. The grounds were still, only the rain and the wind moved. The house stood silent, imposing, wrapped in its shroud of dripping trees. The urge to return, to confront the unknown, pulsed strongly, to find the source of the whispers, to unearth the mansion's core narrative. But a deeper, colder instinct counseled retreat, warning him to preserve what remained of his composure. He sat there for a long time, suspended between fear and fascination. His head ached, his ears still faintly ringing with the memory of those sibilant voices. Ultimately, prudence, or perhaps exhaustion, won. He had enough for one day. Starting the engine again, he let the headlights carve a path through the rain-slicked drive. His hands felt steadier now, capable of steering, but the knot of dread remained lodged deep in his stomach. He cast one final look at the brooding mansion as the rain fell harder, turning the drive into a shallow, reflecting stream. He pulled away, a confusing mixture of profound relief and sharp disappointment churning within him. As the car carried him back towards the mundane world of the main road, his thoughts remained entangled in the mansion's web. The whispers, the dragging sounds, the shapes that flickered at the edge of sight. Possibilities bloomed in the darkness of his mind. He knew he would return, perhaps with better equipment, perhaps with another soul brave or foolish enough to accompany him. He needed to capture something concrete, some evidence of the forces that stirred within those decaying walls. But for now, escape and the quiet sorting of his fractured thoughts were paramount. Whether he had encountered genuine specters or merely the projections of a mind steeped in suggestion and isolation, Elias couldn't say. All he knew with certainty was that the house possessed a disquieting vitality, an animation woven from inexplicable sounds and movements, the memory of the pale shape in the cellar, the whispers that seemed to follow him, still raised gooseflesh on his skin. Even now, miles away, recalling the oppressive weight of the air tightened his chest. Had the mansion harbored spirits, or had his own imagination conjured demons from dust and shadow? He possessed no proof, only his hastily scribbled notes and the vivid, unsettling imprint on his memory. But the questions demanded answers. He would go back. He had to, even though the prospect terrified him to his core. It began, this unraveling, on a Tuesday evening, a whisper of dissonance in the quiet hum of my apartment. I, Elias Thorne, had returned, drained from the relentless cadence of lecturing, shedding my satchel near the sofa like a weary second skin. The kitchen yielded a glass of water, a simple solace. But upon returning to the living room, my gaze snagged on the ceramic curve of my favorite mug. It rested upon the low table, perhaps 3 inches east of where I'd meticulously positioned it the night prior, near the sharp geometry of the table's corner. An impossibility. Precision is a quiet necessity in my solitary existence. The cartography of my home is a map I know by heart. A flicker of irritation, dismissed. A tremor from passing traffic, perhaps. Or had I, in my fatigue, nudged the table myself? I let the thought dissolve. The unease, however, resurfaced with the demanding light of morning. Already lagging behind schedule for a seminar, a frantic energy propelling me towards the door, my eyes caught on the bookshelf. A weighty volume on abnormal psychology, usually standing sentinel, perfectly flush with its brethren, now leaned at a precarious, almost insolent angle. An inch, maybe more, askew. My meticulously ordered rouse disrupted, a knot tightened in my gut, cold and irrational. Time pressed. I couldn't pause to rectify it. I merely stood, transfixed for a heartbeat, a sudden chill tracing my spine before the urgency of the clock propelled me out into the day. In the days that followed, the quiet anomalies multiplied. A framed print on the wall hung subtly off kilter, its horizon line betraying gravity. A velvet cushion on the armchair migrated from its usual depression. The coaster beneath my evening tea vanished from the coffee table, only to reappear later, wedged unnervingly against the table leg beneath. Night found me prowling the confines of my apartment, a silent interrogator of my own actions. Had I carried that book to the sofa, inadvertently sweeping the coaster to the floor? The memories refused to coalesce. Each misplaced object sent a small, sharp jolt through my chest. My professional life is dedicated to the intricate labyrinth of human cognition, the fallibility of memory. Yet here I was, adrift in a sea of domestic inconsistencies I couldn't fathom. Enough. Action was required. I devised a system, rigorous and empirical. Each night before yielding to sleep, I undertook a meticulous survey, phone in hand, documenting the precise state of my domain. Room by room, I captured the stasis of objects, the alignment of spice jars, the arrangement of pens on my desk, the exact hang of every picture frame. The first night of this ritual stretched past an hour, the sheer volume of images feeling faintly pathological. Yet I craved evidence, tangible proof against the insidious creep of doubt. As a scholar of the mind's deceptions, I knew too well how stress could warp perception. I needed an unblemished record. The following morning, I awoke with a heightened sense of awareness, my pulse a nervous drum against my ribs. Phone retrieved, I began the comparative analysis. The bedroom yielded nothing. The lamp stood firm, the alarm clock angled correctly towards the bed. Then, the living room. My breath hitched. The coffee mug, the very same one from Tuesday, which I distinctly recalled placing and had photographed on the kitchen counter's edge the previous night, now sat forlornly in the stainless steel basin of the sink. A palpable coldness swept over me. I scrolled frantically through the gallery. There it was, last night's image, the mug resolute on the countertop, its handle aimed towards the stove. Now it resided in the sink, empty, save for a few glistening droplets within. No recollection of moving it surfaced. I scrutinized the time-stamped evidence again, searching for any overlooked detail. Nothing accounted for its migration. A constriction formed in my throat. I lived alone. No one possessed a spare key. No visitors had crossed my threshold. The deadbolt was religiously engaged each night, as it was now. A leaden weight settled in my stomach as I left for the university. Attempting to lecture on cognitive biases felt like a grotesque irony, my own thoughts straying relentlessly back to the inexplicable displacement. The question echoed. Who moved the mug. That evening, I returned home with grim determination, conducting a thorough sweep. The door remained secured. The entrance hall appeared undisturbed. Entering the living room, my eyes darted, scanning furniture, shelves, surfaces. All seemed quiescent, aligned with the previous night's photographic record. Yet the air felt charged, thick with an unseen presence. A prickling sensation crawled up my neck, the distinct feeling of being observed. I spun around once, twice, expecting something. Nothing but empty space met my gaze. "Calm yourself, Elias," I internally commanded. Deep breaths. More water. I forced myself towards normalcy, repeating the nightly photographic ritual before retreating to bed. Days bled into weeks. Minor shifts persisted. A book infinitesimally rotated. A pen angled differently. But a far more disturbing pattern began to crystallize. It wasn't just that objects seemed moved. It was that the photographs from previous nights began to subtly diverge from my memory of those nights. I'd study an image, a fountain pen lying diagonally across my journal, and a jarring thought would surface. No, that's not how I left it. That's not how I remember photographing it. But the digital file was immutable, irrefutable. The horrifying truth dawned slowly. The objects weren't necessarily migrating. My recollection of their prior state was becoming fluid, unreliable. This revelation struck with the force of a physical blow. I scrolled through image after image, comparing consecutive days, seeking definitive proof of change. Often, there was none. Items remained static, yet my internal narrative insisted they had shifted. My own mind was fabricating the discrepancies. One night, slumped on the sofa, the phone screen illuminating my face, the endless stream of images blurring, my heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in my chest. My hands trembled. Nausea churned low in my belly. Am I losing my grip? Is this the onset of something irreversible? The thought was a chilling abyss I desperately wanted to avoid, yet no other explanation presented itself. My world began to shrink. Social invitations were declined. Optional faculty meetings skipped. My apartment became both sanctuary and prison. Double-checking became second nature. Moving a chair necessitated a photo. Opening a drawer prompted a mental inventory. My phone's memory swelled with mundane proofs of existence. Was it merely stress? An overburdened mind manifesting its strain in peculiar ways? Perhaps. But the persistent feeling of wrongness, the nocturnal restlessness, couldn't be so easily dismissed. I'd wake in a cold sweat, heart racing, sometimes convinced I'd heard faint scuttling sounds, a soft click from the hallway. Each investigation yielded nothing but the oppressive silence and the lingering taste of fear. My academic mind flirted with external, even esoteric explanations, but the evidence refused to cooperate. It pointed inwards, towards a fault line in my own psyche. My memories were becoming unstable ground. A fragment of a childhood recollection surfaced one afternoon, vivid but fragile, only to dissipate by the next day, leaving behind only the ghost of its presence. The memory of the memory itself had faded. Concerns about repressed experiences, phenomena I'd only studied clinically, now felt terrifyingly personal. The bedrock of my own past felt increasingly porous. Driven by a need for structure, I collated everything onto my laptop, folders meticulously labeled by date and time, cross-referenced notes. I sought correlations, stress levels, sleep patterns, diet. No clear trigger emerged. But as I sifted through the digital detritus of my observations, a subtle thematic link surfaced. The objects involved in these perceived shifts, the ones that triggered the memory dissonance, were often items freighted with personal history. Gifts from estranged friends, artifacts from my office, yes, but predominantly relics from my life before academia. A dog-eared novel from my undergraduate years, a tarnished silver frame acquired in my early 20s, the very coffee mug that initiated this descent, a veteran of late-night graduate school study sessions. Each instance of perceived displacement involved one of these temporal anchors. I pressed deeper, forcing myself to interrogate the significance of these items. What period did they evoke? Fragments of my late teens, my early 20s, flickered at the edge of consciousness, and then a void, a particular summer shrouded in an inexplicable fog. Thinking about it brought a dull ache behind my eyes, a pressure in my chest. Images surfaced, an old, slightly dilapidated apartment building, peeling paint, the scent of stale cigarettes in a hallway. I've never smoked. Then the memory would shear off, leaving only static. One evening, I unearthed an old photograph, myself, younger, grinning alongside two friends at some forgotten campus function. My hand trembled, holding the faded print. The smile felt alien. Who took this picture? The date stamp confirmed it. That summer. A sudden icy jolt of fear shot through me. My breath grew shallow. I had to put the photo down. The lapses intensified. Forgetting where I'd placed my phone, my wallet, only to find them in plain sight moments later, with no memory of putting them there. Each instance left me breathless, a cold sweat beating on my forehead. It wasn't just the positions of inanimate objects anymore. I was losing track of my own agency, my own recent actions. One evening found me seated at my desk, the cursor blinking rhythmically on the laptop screen, a tiny, insistent pulse in the dim light. I intended to write, to excavate that lost summer, hoping the act itself might unearth the buried thing. 2 sentences materialized before a sharp headache bloomed behind my temples. My jaw clenched. A phone notification buzzed. Ignored. I typed another halting phrase. My vision swam slightly. Sweat slicked my palms. Focusing felt like wading through mud. My mind actively resisted the retrieval. Days dissolved into a monotonous loop. Lectures delivered on autopilot. Familiar words spoken from habit, not conviction. At home, the tension ratcheted higher. Sleep offered little respite. The obsessive checking continued. Sometimes the conviction that the apartment itself was subtly rearranging its dimensions felt utterly real, only to be dispelled by the cold, hard evidence of the photographs. It was me. My perception of reality was the thing adrift. One night, a sharp, metallic click echoed from the depths of my bedroom closet. I bolted upright, heart slamming against my sternum, flashlight beam trembling in my hand. The closet yielded nothing. Hangers hung still. Shoes rested in orderly pairs. Empty. I stood there, breathing raggedly, scanning every shadow, every corner. Dizziness washed over me. The sound had been undeniable, yet no source existed. I stumbled back to bed, staring sightlessly at the ceiling until the first gray hints of dawn. The thought of seeking professional help surfaced more insistently. A colleague specialized in memory disorders. But the shame, the humiliation of admitting this loss of control, held me back. I stalled, clinging to the eroding belief that I could navigate this alone. One final strategy: audio recording. I positioned my phone on the living room table, narrating my evening routine, detailing the placement of objects, the contents of my meal, the texture of my fatigue. I let the recording capture my own voice, establishing the facts, before embarking on the nightly photo ritual. The familiar headache pulsed as I tried to empty my mind for sleep. The next morning I played it back. My own tired voice droned on, listing the precise location of items, and the coffee mug, rinsed, placed in the sink. I listened, then checked the photos. They matched the recording. The mug was indeed in the sink, yet the memory screamed otherwise. I left it on the table. My chest tightened. Irrefutable proof. My own recorded words, contradicted by the persistent, vivid conviction of my own mind. There was nowhere left to turn but towards the void, that forgotten summer. I spread the old photographs across the coffee table, arranging them chronologically. A leaden weight pressed down as I stared at certain images. My hands shook. My breathing quickened. The dilapidated apartment swam back into focus. The peeling paint, the single bare bulb casting stark shadows. The remembered echo of a furious argument. My voice, raw and strained. Another voice, sharp and accusatory. My heart pounded violently. And then, blankness. The memory fractured, leaving only the echo of pain. Something essential, I knew then, was tethered to that lost time. Something buried, walled off. My mind, in its strange, oblique way, was forcing a reckoning. These perceptual distortions, these memory glitches, they weren't random noise, they were signals, flares sent up from a submerged part of myself. It wasn't an intruder, not a ghost, not incipient dementia. It was my own history clawing its way to the surface. A decision formed. I extinguished the overhead lights, drew the curtains, leaving only a single lamp burning low. Seated on the sofa, I began again, methodically examining each photograph from that summer, pushing past the stabs of pain behind my eyes. Slowly, painfully, fragments returned. A profound personal crisis. A betrayal by someone implicitly trusted. A week lost to sleeplessness and starvation. The desperate, hurried departure from that apartment, carrying only a single suitcase, leaving pieces of my past behind. As these fractured memories surfaced, a strange alloy of relief and terror washed through me. My heart still hammered. My mouth was desert dry, but a measure of clarity pierced the fog. I hadn't fully processed that trauma. I had entombed it. Now confronted by these unsettling cognitive shifts, I understood. My brain was disrupting my present to force engagement with the past. Not madness, a mechanism. My body still thrummed with adrenaline, yet a small, quiet center of calm began to form within the storm. I sat for a long while, the old photographs silent witnesses on the table. Breathing slowly, deliberately, I let the returning memories settle, not fighting them. I would call Amelia, a therapist friend, someone whose discretion and insight I trusted. I knew the memory anomalies might not cease immediately. More fragments might surface, sharp and unwelcome. But the paralyzing fear had loosened its grip. There was a reason, an internal logic, however painful. Closing the laptop, I gathered the photos into a neat stack. Standing, a dull ache resonated in my lower back. My gaze swept across the living room, steady, solid. The furniture held its place. The mug rested precisely where I'd left it hours ago. My phone lay on the end table exactly where I remembered placing it. For the first time in weeks, my immediate world felt stable, coherent, even if the landscape within still needed extensive repair. The documentation, the photos, would continue, a necessary scaffold for a while longer. But the panic had subsided, replaced by a weary resolve. My mind wasn't betraying me. It was guiding me, however harshly. That singular thought offered a fragile reassurance. I walked towards the bedroom, switched off the lamp, and slid beneath the covers. My heart still beat faster than normal, but my feet felt planted on solid ground. Closing my eyes, I drifted towards sleep, acutely aware that I stood at the beginning of a long, shadowed path, but finally ready to walk it. The instant the taillights vanished down the highway, the quiet in the Starlight Servery shifted. It ceased being empty and became charged, thick with an unspoken current that prickled the skin. 5 men lingered, islands of menace in the vinyl booths, their collective gaze fixed on me, radiating a hunger utterly divorced from the menu. My name is Alara. For nigh on 2 years, the graveyard shift at this roadside constellation, tucked just off the interstate, had been mine. It's the sort of haven where chrome meets coffee, where truckers and sleepless wanderers pause for caffeine and a wedge of pie under the hum of fluorescent stars. Mostly, the nights unfolded in a quiet rhythm, a gentle ebb and flow of weary souls seeking brief respite. This Tuesday, however, the tide had run unnaturally slow. A smattering of familiar faces had drifted in and out, leaving the air still. By 2 a.m., only the quintet remained. They'd arrived near midnight, a boisterous wave that initially seemed manageable, just another splash of rowdiness in the deep end of the night. I'd navigated rougher waters, but as the hours bled away and they showed no inclination to depart, unease began to coil within me. Something discordant resonated from them, an air thick with potential violence that set my nerves vibrating. They'd positioned themselves strategically, occupying separate booths, effectively penning me behind the long sweep of the counter. "Hey, doll face," the largest of them rumbled, his voice gravelly. "Let's name him Grunt, for the sheer heft and brutish air about him, amplified by a beard like tangled undergrowth. How's about we get some more of that coffee?" I hoisted the familiar shield of a smile, the one reserved for masking disquiet. "Coming right up. But gentlemen, much as I enjoy your company, closing time is in 15 minutes. Grunt's eyes flickered towards his companions. A silent, predatory language passed between them, tightening a knot low in my belly. "Oh, now," he drawled, The joviality thin, stretched taut over a palpable threat. Place like this, surely you can bend the rules a little for your favorite patrons. A laugh, brittle and forced, escaped me. I tried to keep the tone light, buoyant. Sorry, fellas. Regulations are regulations. Gotta lock the doors and make tracks. Make tracks where? The question came from a wiry man, tattoos crawling like ivy up his neck from beneath his collar. Call him Twitch. Got someone warm waiting up for you, dull face? An icy tracer slipped down my vertebrae. My vacant apartment swam before my eyes. The stark reality that no one expected me until tomorrow evening's shift. My boyfriend, the lie slipped out, practiced and smooth. He'll be starting to worry. Grunt grinned, a flash of unnervingly white, sharp teeth. Now, no need for stories amongst friends. We're all pals here, right? Pals. Pals don't make your pulse hammer against your ribs or your skin crawl with apprehension. I turned away, busying myself with the obsessive wiping of an already gleaming counter, my gaze skittering anywhere but towards their faces. My thoughts scrambled like panicked birds, searching for an escape route. The landline resided in the back office. My mobile languished in my locker. The nearest sign of civilization, a scattering of houses, lay a desolate half-mile down the asphalt ribbon. You know, Grunt declared, rising with a deliberate theatrical stretch. Thinking maybe coffee ain't what we're after. Maybe something with a bit more kick. Got any firewater tucked away back there? My head shook. A small, involuntary movement as I edged back from the counter he now leaned against. Apologies, we're not licensed for alcohol. He loomed closer, invading my space. The stale miasma of cigarettes clung to him. Come on now, Ilara. A sharp girl like you. Bet you know where the real stash is hidden. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through me. I hadn't offered my name. How do you know my name? The tremor in my voice was undeniable. Grunt's grin stretched wider, predatory. Oh, we know lots about you, Ilara. Been scoping this place out, watching you. The others had risen now, forming a loose, menacing crescent before the counter. I felt trapped, a doe cornered by a patiently waiting pack, my heart thundering a frantic rhythm against my bones. Look, I managed, wrestling my voice into a semblance of steadiness. I don't want any trouble. Why don't you all just head out now? We can forget any of this happened, all right? Twitch emitted a laugh, a rasping sound that scraped raw against my nerves. Oh, we ain't heading nowhere, dull face. The night's just getting interesting. I saw Grunt's hand drift towards the inside of his jacket. Pure, instinctual panic surged. Without conscious thought, I seized the glass pot of fresh, scalding coffee and flung its contents directly at him. A guttural howl erupted as the searing liquid hit his face and chest. I didn't linger for the aftermath. I leveraged myself over the Formica barrier in a desperate, clumsy vault and sprinted for the sanctuary of the back office. Behind me, shouts erupted, punctuated by the crash of furniture overturned in their sudden, enraged pursuit. My fingers, slick with sweat, betrayed me on the office door lock. Just as the bolt slid home, a heavy impact slammed against the wood from the other side. "That wasn't smart, Ilara," Grunt's voice snarled, distorted by fury. "Now you've gone and made us angry. Gonna have to teach you some manners." I snatched the receiver of the old phone, dialing 911 with shaking digits. "Answer. Please answer." 911, what is your emergency? The calm, professional voice nearly broke me. A sob caught in my throat. "Help me," I choked out. "Starlight Servery, Highway 16, men here trying to break in. They're going to..." Silence. The line went utterly dead. My horrified gaze followed the cord hanging limply from the wall jack, severed cleanly from outside the office. The assault on the door intensified, the impacts heavier, more rhythmic. The groan and crack of stressed timber filled the small space. It wouldn't last. "Think, Ilara, think." My eyes darted wildly, seeking purchase, a weapon, anything. They snagged on the small high window near the ceiling, barely large enough, grime-streaked, but the only possibility. I shoved the metal desk beneath it, scrambling onto its surface. The window was fused shut, sealed by years of paint and neglect. Behind me, the door began to splinter, to give way. With a final desperate surge of adrenaline, I rammed my shoulder against the frame. The window popped open with a reluctant screech. I hauled myself upward, wriggling through the narrow aperture. Fabric ripped as my shirt snagged on an unseen nail. I tumbled out, landing hard on the sharp gravel behind the diner. The impact stole my breath, but fear was a brutal stimulant. I scrambled upright, the sounds of discovery erupting from within the building, confirming they'd find my exit route momentarily. I ran. I ran harder than I knew possible, lungs screaming for air, the sharp stones biting into the soles of my feet. The highway stretched before me, an empty black ribbon under a starless sky. No headlights pierced the gloom. The nearest town felt worlds away. Behind me, the diner's back door crashed open. "There she is!" Twitch's shout sliced through the night air. I veered sharply off the pavement, plunging into the adjacent field. Tall, dry grass lashed at my face and arms like whips as I thrashed through the darkness. I could hear them crashing after me, their heavier footfalls and ragged breathing a terrifying soundtrack spurring me onward. Time distorted, stretching seconds into agonizing eternities. My legs turned to leaden weights. My chest felt ablaze, yet stopping was unthinkable. Then, just as exhaustion threatened to pull me under, a glimmer. Lights. Distant, warm, beckoning lights. a house. Summoning a final reservoir of strength I hadn't known I possessed, I aimed myself towards that beacon and sprinted. The sounds of pursuit were closer now, terrifyingly close. I stumbled onto a porch, hammering on the solid wood door with frantic fists. "Help!" The scream tore from my raw throat. "Please, somebody help me." The porch light flared on. Movement stirred within. "Please, oh please." The door swung inward, revealing an elderly man framed in the light, a shotgun held steady in his weathered hands. His eyes widened, taking in my disheveled state. Torn clothes, streaks of blood, eyes wide with the reflection of pure dread. "Please," I gasped again. "They're chasing me. Help me." He acted without hesitation, pulling me roughly inside, slamming the heavy door shut, the deadbolt clicking home with reassuring finality. "Agnes," he bellowed towards the interior. "Call the sheriff. Now." My legs buckled, my body surrendering to the aftermath of terror. I collapsed onto the entryway floor. Through the window, I saw indistinct shapes pause at the edge of the property line, flickering in the porch light's spill. They advanced no further. The sight of Silas, I learned his name later, and his shotgun had clearly given them. The ensuing hour was a fragmented montage, the wail of approaching sirens, the calm efficiency of paramedics, the barrage of questions, delivered gently but insistently. The 5 men were apprehended days later, intercepted near the state line. It transpired they were fugitives, leaving a trail of violence across 3 states. I recounted the night's events, picked their faces from arrays of photographs, stood shaking but resolute in a courtroom. Yet even the sight of them being led away in chains couldn't fully exorcise the ghost of that night's fear. 2 years have passed. The night shift is a relic of a former life. Solitude in darkness remains an insurmountable barrier. Shadows startle me. Loud noises make me flinch. Every unfamiliar face holds a flicker of potential menace. But I endured. I escaped. And that knowledge is an anchor. Each dawn, I reaffirm it. I am not merely defined by what happened. I am a survivor. And regardless of how profoundly the darkness descends, I carry within me the certainty that I possess the strength to endure until the light returns. There's a peculiar magnetism to places surrendered to time, a resonance that vibrates just beneath the skin. Perhaps it's the echo of lives lived and abandoned, or the simple weight of accumulated stillness. When the skeletal frame of that cabin materialized through the deep woods, a place palpably forgotten, every rational fiber should have screamed retreat. But curiosity, that insidious serpent, coils tighter when warned away. I was adrift, solitary, in a tract of woodland untouched by my boots before. Autumn held the air in a perfect, crystalline suspension, leaves shattered like brittle glass underfoot. My intention was merely to trace the known trail, yet a flicker drew my gaze, a thread of a path, almost consumed by undergrowth, weaving into the deeper green. Neglected perhaps for generations, its subtle invitation was irresistible. An old game trail, a forgotten logging scar. I veered, yielding to its pull, assuming it would eventually return me to the familiar. With each step inward, the forest muted itself. The bright chatter of birds dissolved, leaving a silence so profound it felt sculpted. Trees ascended, immense and ancient, their limbs interlacing into a dense ceiling that fractured the sunlight into oblique, shifting bars across the path. Then I saw it. Hunkered low between the colossal trunks, almost camouflaged by clinging moss and parasitic vines, stood the cabin. Its spine, the roof ridge, visibly sagged. Its timber skin, weathered to a spectral gray, bore the legions of decay. A vacant window socket gaped on one flank, a black mouth through which the wind exhaled, rattling loose timbers like old bones. I halted. A frisson of cold, unrelated to the crisp air, traced my spine. This place emanated more than neglect. It possessed a presence, not just swallowed by the wilderness, but actively claimed by it. The atmosphere thickened around it, charged as if the very woods held their breath, observing. An old hunter's refuge, I reasoned, a relic left by long-gone timber men. Yet the disquiet, a prickling awareness at the nape of my neck, refused to subside as my eyes remained fixed on the ruin. Minutes stretched, suspended in indecision. Logic pleaded for retreat, for the comfort of the marked trail, for willful ignorance. But another current, deeper and more primal, tugged me onward. What phantom did I hope to unearth? Relics of a vanished life? Fragments of a story? Or was it simply the lure of the unknown, a deviation from the hike's placid rhythm? Regardless, my feet began moving, crunching softly over the path's debris, closing the distance. Proximity amplified its decrepitude. The door listed drunkenly from tormented hinges. The porch steps, mere suggestions of timber, had succumbed to rot. Through warped planks, I glimpsed an interior steeped in shadow, darkness clinging possessively to the corners. Drawing a breath that felt heavy in my lungs, I mounted the groaning porch. The wood complained loudly under my weight, the sound obscene in the pervasive hush. A pause, a final flicker of hesitation, then my hand reached out, nudging the door. It yielded with a protracted groan, swinging inward to unveil a compact, desolate chamber. Dust lay thick as velvet snow, mingled with brittle leaves blown in through the window's void. The scant remnants of furniture were fractured and draped in cobwebs like macabre shrouds. A table, listing precariously on 3 legs, occupied the center. A solitary chair lay overturned beside it, evoking a sense of abrupt departure. I crossed the threshold. The air inside was stagnant, heavy with the perfume of damp decay and aged wood, noticeably colder than the forest outside, as if the walls retained the chill of countless vacant nights. My breath plumed before me. Each footstep left a stark imprint in the deep dust. There was little to catalog. Near total emptiness, save for some corroded tools leaning against a wall and what appeared to be the rusted husk of a lantern beside the doorframe. Yet the wrongness persisted, intensifying. It was too still, unnervingly so. A feeling lingered, sharp and incongruous. Recent presence. Despite the patina of years, it felt as though someone, or something, had disturbed this stillness not long ago. I drifted towards the broken window, gazing out at the silent theater of the woods. The trees stood sentinel, impassive, their branches swaying in a slow, hypnotic dance. But the sensation of being watched had only sharpened since I'd entered, becoming almost palpable. The forest had eyes, I felt, and they were fixed upon me, waiting for me to leave, or perhaps not to. It was then my gaze snagged on an anomaly. There, etched into the dust near the room's far corner. Footprints. Not mine. I hadn't ventured that way. They were disturbingly distinct, the edges crisp against the settled grime, as if impressed only moments before my arrival. My pulse leapt, a frantic drum against my ribs. The prints tracked from the dim corner towards the doorway I now occupied, and then simply ceased. Whoever made them hadn't lingered. I spun around, scanning the shadowed recesses again, half convinced a figure would resolve from the gloom. Nothing, only emptiness and dust. A sudden squall of wind gusted through the shattered window, momentarily swirling the dust motes into frantic eddies. The door beside me creaked again, nudged by an invisible pressure. Gooseflesh erupted across my skin. A visceral urge to flee surged through me, and I took an involuntary step back. I pivoted towards the exit, muscles coiled to sprint, but froze. A sound, faint, almost subliminal beneath the cabin's arthritic groans, yet undeniably present, a soft, rhythmic tap, tap, tapping, like knuckles rapping gently against wood. Initially, I dismissed it. The wind, a branch skittering against the outer wall. But as I strained to listen, the sound gained definition, grew louder, its cadence deliberate, insistent. It originated from below. My eyes dropped to the floorboards beneath my feet, my breath seizing. The tapping was steady now, resonating upward through the aged wood, a muffled percussion from the crawlspace or cellar beneath. Someone, something, trapped or waiting below, knocking for release. I recoiled, heart hammering violently, the sound escalating with each frantic beat. What lay beneath? The question was a shard of ice in my gut, one I had no desire to answer. Thought abandoned, instinct took over. I launched myself towards the door, stumbling onto the dilapidated porch. Outside, the wind had risen to a howl, tearing through the canopy, branches flailing like tormented limbs. I didn't dare look back. I ran. Feet pounded the overgrown trail, breath tearing raggedly from my lungs. Behind me, the cabin vanished into the churning green and the keening wind. But the tapping pursued me, an auditory phantom echoing long after I burst onto the main trail. I didn't cease running until the familiar shape of my car resolved on the gravel verge. Even then, my hands trembled uncontrollably as I fumbled the keys into the lock. Inside, doors secured, I accelerated away, the forest shrinking into a dark mass in the rear-view mirror. That cabin haunts my thoughts. The source of that sound remains an open wound in my memory. An animal scrabbling beneath the floor? The wind playing tricks? Auditory hallucination born of unease? Perhaps, but a deeper conviction persists. Something was down there, something aware, and it was knocking. The engine coughed, a death rattle in the throat of the machine. And then silence descended, vast and absolute. Before me, the asphalt ribboned into infinity, swallowed by the bruised twilight sky. Long skeletal shadows stretched from the sparse desert flora, painting the barren expanse in shades of unease. Utterly alone, catastrophically stranded, and wholly unready for the darkness gathering both outside and in. Hours I'd driven, chasing the horizon, desperate to witness my sister Clara's vows. The shortcut, a gamble whispered by a faded map, now mocked me. A fool's errand turned potential tomb. My phone, a useless brick for the past hour, offered no solace. The last outpost of civilization, a flickering gas station sign, lay leagues behind me, a memory already dissolving in the rearview mirror of my mind. As the car drifted onto the gritty shoulder, momentum bleeding away, a cold fist clenched deep in my gut. Hope, that irrational ember, prompted me to lift the hood. I peered into the metallic guts, a labyrinth of wires and grime utterly alien to me. Distinguishing a piston from a spark plug was beyond my ken. A few moments of futile prodding, a gesture against the inevitable, ended with the hood slamming shut, the sound startlingly loud in the stillness. It was then, against the deepening purple of the horizon, that twin lights materialized. Relief surged, potent and dizzying, as the approaching vehicle resolved into a shape. An old tow truck, its paint sun-bleached and flaking like old skin. Salvation lumbering towards me on worn tires. It pulled up behind my lifeless car, brakes sighing. A figure emerged, silhouetted against the dying light. Older, perhaps late 50s, his hair a salt and pepper thatch beneath a greasy cap pulled low. His face, etched by sun and wind, seemed carved from the landscape itself. Overalls, stained with the ghost of countless repairs, completed the picture. Bit of bother? His voice scraped like stones rolling downhill, yet held no immediate malice. I could only nod, throat tight with a fragile gratitude. It just stopped, completely dead. I haven't a clue. He ambled closer, wiping ingrained grease from his hands onto a rag plucked from a hip pocket. Let's have a gander. While he bent over the engine block, his presence a mixture of comfort and vague disquiet, I found my voice. I'm Ilara. Thank you, truly, for stopping. A grunt was his initial reply, his focus absolute. Silas, it's no trouble. Roads quiet these days. Minutes passed, filled only by the metallic clicks and sighs of his inspection. Finally, Silas straightened, letting out a breath that seemed to carry the weight of bad news. Well now, Ilara, looks like your alternator gave up the ghost. No fixing that out here on the verge. My fragile hope disintegrated. So, what now? Silas rubbed his chin, his gaze distant, calculating. Tell you what, I can haul you back to my place. Workshops maybe 30 miles down the road. Might have a spare fits this model. If not, order one come morning. Hesitation prickled, The sun had fully surrendered, leaving the world in shades of gray and encroaching black. The thought of venturing deeper into this nowhere, to an unknown workshop with this stranger. Yet what alternative remained? Walk back 50 miles? Wait for a dawn that promised only more isolation? Okay, the word felt forced, thin. That would be incredibly helpful. Thank you, Silas. While he expertly hitched my car, its dead weight now tethered to his truck, I climbed into the passenger cab. The air hung thick with the ghosts of stale cigarette smoke and worn leather. Tools and anonymous metal parts littered the dashboard and floor like fossils. We lurched onto the highway, the truck's headlights' feeble beams slicing into the oppressive gloom. Silas drove in near silence, punctuated only by laconic observations about the dry spell or the emptiness of the road. With each mile devoured by the darkness, a knot of anxiety tightened within me. After an eternity compressed into perhaps 45 minutes, Silas wrenched the wheel, turning off the smooth asphalt onto a rutted dirt track. The truck bucked and swayed, navigating the uneven terrain by feel as much as sight. Your workshop? It's out this way? The tremor in my voice was impossible to conceal. He nodded, eyes fixed on the barely visible path. Yep, land's cheaper. Preferred the quiet, too. We eventually shuddered to a halt before a large, skeletal building. Its paint was a distant memory, the sign above the cavernous door barely legible. Silas Auto Repair. A single naked bulb flickered over the gravel yard, casting jittery, elongated shadows from the rusted carcasses of vehicles scattered like forgotten bones. Silas killed the engine, the sudden silence pressing in. He turned to me. Right then, here we are. Get your car unhooked. Take a proper look, come sunrise. Stepping out of the cab, a chill, unrelated to the night air, traced its way down my spine. The quiet was profound, broken only by the frantic chirping of unseen insects and the mournful groan of the old building settling in the wind. Is there, a motel nearby? Somewhere I could stay. I fought to keep my voice level, betraying none of the fear blooming inside. Silas shook his head slowly. Nearest is 50 miles back the way we came. Don't you worry none. Got a spare cot in the back room. You can bunk down there. My heart hammered against my ribs. Warning klaxons shrieked in my mind, loud and insistent. Stay calm. Think. That's very generous, Silas, but I wouldn't want to put you out. Perhaps you could just call a taxi for me? A chuckle rumbled in his chest, devoid of warmth. No taxis come out this far, lass, and that phone of yours, still dead weight, no signal for miles around. I swallowed, the dryness in my throat painful. The sheer, terrifying isolation crashed down on me. I see. Well, perhaps I'll just sleep in my car then. Really, I'll be fine. His expression shifted, hardening like cooling iron. Now that ain't hospitable, is it? Offering you a warm bed. Bit rude to refuse, wouldn't you say? A subconscious step back. My eyes darted, seeking escape routes in the oppressive dark. Nothing, just endless night and the whispering desert. Look, I tried for firmness, a shield against the rising panic. I appreciate everything, truly, but I'd be more comfortable in my car. If you could just unhook it. He moved with startling speed for a man his size. One moment he was by the truck, the next he stood directly before me, his calloused hand clamping onto my forearm like a vice. Don't think you're grasping the situation, Ilara. You ain't going nowhere. Pure animal terror flooded my veins. The reality, stark and brutal, hit me. I wrenched my arm back, twisting away, turning to flee, but he was faster, stronger. An arm like a steel band locked around my waist, lifting me clear off the ground as I kicked and thrashed, a choked scream tearing from my throat. Help! Please, somebody help me. Futile cries lost in the vast, uncaring emptiness. His other hand clamped brutally over my mouth, stifling the sounds, pressing the taste of grease and dirt against my lips. Nobody hears nothing out here, lass. Now quit your struggling. Make it easier on us both. Instinct took over. I bit down, hard, into the fleshy part of his hand, covering my mouth. The coppery tang of blood filled my senses. Silas roared, cursing, his grip momentarily slackening. It was enough. I broke free, scrambling away, sprinting towards the vague promise of the dirt road. My heart threatened to explode, pounding a frantic rhythm against the silence. Darkness betrayed me. My foot snagged on unseen scrap metal, sending me crashing down onto the unforgiving gravel. Agony flared in my ankle as I tried, desperately, to rise. His heavy boots crunched closer. Now see what you've done, he chided, the tone disturbingly gentle, almost paternal. Gone and hurt yourself proper. Suppose I'll have to carry you inside now. As he stooped, reaching for me, I lashed out with my uninjured leg, my heel connecting solidly with his groin. A choked groan, and he folded, doubling over, my chance. Ignoring the screaming protest from my ankle, I scrambled upright, hobbling, lunging towards the tow truck. The keys. Please let the keys still be there. I ripped the driver's door open, hauling myself onto the cracked seat. Trembling fingers fumbled, found the ignition slot, turned. A silent, desperate prayer. The engine roared, a beautiful, deafening sound. Just as it caught, Silas's hand clamped onto my arm again, his face contorted with rage. You little... His snarl was cut short. Panic fueled me. I slammed the gear shift into reverse. The truck leaped backward, catching Silas off guard, breaking his hold. I stomped on the accelerator. In the rearview mirror, a fleeting image. Silas, stumbling, falling hard onto the gravel. Shifting into drive, I floored the pedal. the truck bouncing violently down the treacherous track, fishtailing wildly. Tears streamed, hot and blinding, my entire body convulsing with adrenaline and terror. Only when the tires hit the blessed smoothness of the highway did I dare ease off the accelerator just slightly. Through the long, dark hours I drove, putting mile after relentless mile between myself and that place of nightmare. As the first tentative fingers of dawn painted the eastern sky, signs of life reappeared. A gas station shimmered on the horizon like a mirage, solidifying into reality. I pulled in, my hands shaking so violently I could barely turn the key to silence the engine that had saved me. The attendant's face creased with concern as I limped, ragged and tear-streaked, into the small store. "Miss, you okay? Looks like you had one hell of a night." I could only nod, words choked by the knot of residual fear in my throat. He kindly let me use the store phone. Within the hour, the reassuring sight of flashing blue and red lights filled the parking lot. 2 officers listened, their expressions grim as the story tumbled out of me, disjointed and raw. They promised a full investigation of Silas's property, but cautioned that without corroborating evidence, charges might prove difficult. Sitting in the back of the patrol car, en route to the nearest clinic for my throbbing ankle, Silas's gravelly voice echoed in my mind. Nobody hears nothing out here. A shudder racked my body as the chilling truth of how close I'd come settled deep in my bones. The highway, that menacing ribbon of darkness hours before, now felt like a lifeline, pulling me inexorably back towards the world of the living. I never made it to Clara's wedding, explaining why over a borrowed hospital phone was surreal, yet underscored by an overwhelming, gut-wrenching gratitude. I was alive. I had clawed my way back, and I swore, with every fiber of my being, I would never, ever take a shortcut again. A flicker in the hallway's antique glass, a distortion where only stillness should have reigned, gone before my eyes could truly focus. Yet the impression lingered, a cold serpent coiling up my spine as I returned my attention to the day's accumulated post. This sprawling manor was meant to be my solitary domain, but an insidious certainty whispered otherwise. My tenure as custodian of this opulent emptiness, a role usually defined by quiet comfort, was poised to unravel into a harrowing pursuit by an unseen presence. Hora, that's my name. For 5 years, the vacant sanctuaries of the affluent have been my temporary domains, a peculiar profession involving guardianship of lavish estates, tending to indulged pets, and inhabiting, however transiently, the orbits of the wealthy while they pursued global diversions. The Ashworth Commission stood as the zenith of my career, a 10,000-square-foot Victorian behemoth cradled within 20 acres of relentlessly perfected landscape. Its proprietors, a seldom-seen titan of technology and his ephemeral wife, had embarked on a 90-day circumnavigation, leaving me within their fortress. Their pre-departure briefing had been meticulous. Demonstrations of the formidable security apparatus, introductions to the phalanx of groundskeepers and domestic staff with their own schedules, and a daunting catalogue of duties required to maintain the estate's pulse. 2 weeks dissolved in sun-drenched leisure, marked by poolside repose, explorations through the labyrinthine library, and meditative strolls across gardens sculpted with obsessive precision. Then, the subtle dissonances began. A misplaced volume reappearing on its designated shelf, inexplicable fluctuations in the ambient temperature of sealed rooms. Once, a distinct pattern of footfalls echoed from the upper floor while I occupied the kitchen. Yet investigation revealed only vacant chambers, breathing silence. Rationalizations offered themselves readily. The groans of an old structure settling, memory's fickle nature, the advanced climate control system exercising its unseen will. Still, the sensation of being observed, an invisible weight, intensified with each rotation of the earth. The night the mirror lied cemented the unease into something sharper, a tangible dread. Sleep became a fortress besieged by phantom sounds, easily breached. Just as consciousness threatened to surrender, a soft, definitive thud resonated from the lower level, snapping me instantly awake. My heart hammered against my ribs. Slipping from the bed, phone clutched in one hand, a weighty torch in the other, I began my descent. Barefoot on plush silence, I navigated the grand, curving spine of the staircase. Darkness pooled in the corners, rendered deeper by the skeletal moonlight piercing the tall windows. Reaching the landing, the sound repeated, a faint, scraping noise originating from Mr. Ashworth's private study. Tremors traveled up my arm as I keyed the emergency number, my thumb poised above the final digit. The study door stood partially open, a dark mouth slightly agape. Summoning a reservoir of courage I hadn't known I possessed, I pushed it wider, the torch beam slicing the void. It illuminated nothing. The room was undisturbed, objects resting in their familiar places. A ragged sigh escaped me, laced with self-reproach. Had imagination conjured the entire episode? It was then my gaze snagged on the desk drawer. A mere sliver of an opening, yet I possessed an unshakable certainty it had been flush just hours before. Ice water seemed to replace my blood. Someone had been here, searching. I recoiled from the doorway, eyes scanning the shadowed expanse of the hall. The intruder might still be lurking within these walls. Escape, summoning aid. These imperatives screamed in my mind. But as I pivoted to flee, I collided not with furniture, but with warm, resisting flesh. A hand, rough and absolute, smothered my cry before it could fully form. Silence. A low growl vibrated near my ear. Cooperate, and this remains simple. Terror, stark and paralyzing, flooded me as I was propelled back into the study. Shoved into an armchair, the suffocating grip finally released. In the ambient gloom, my captor resolved into a figure clad entirely in black, features lost behind the anonymity of a ski mask. "Where is it?" the voice demanded, sharp with impatience. Confusion warred with fear. "Where's... what?" "No games," he snarled, leaning closer. "The vault. Ashworth's vault. Location." My thoughts scattered like startled birds. A safe existed. The Ashworths had alluded to it, but its whereabouts remained undisclosed. "I don't know," I managed, the words trembling. "They never told me." Behind the mask, unseen eyes narrowed. "You inhabit this place for weeks, and you expect me to swallow that? You must have observed them accessing it." I shook my head, a frantic negation. "I swear I haven't. Their primary valuables are off-site, in a bank. This house is enormous. The safe could be anywhere." He regarded me, a long assessing silence stretching between us, before a wave of frustration seemed to diminish him slightly. "Damn," he breathed. "Fine. New plan. You assist my search. Every room. You lie. You obstruct." The menace remained unspoken, potent. Thus began a grotesque tour, room by violated room, for the subsequent 2 hours. My captor moved with a chilling efficiency, probing behind canvases, rapping knuckles against paneling, his gaze dissecting bookshelves for the telltale signs of hidden mechanisms. Simultaneously, my own mind raced, desperately seeking an opportunity, a flaw in his vigilance, a path to salvation. Entering the cedar-scented vastness of the master walk-in closet, inspiration sparked, a desperate gamble. "Wait," I breathed, gesturing towards an unassuming stretch of wall. "I think Mrs. Ashworth once mentioned a concealed panel near here." A glint of avarice ignited in his posture as he turned his attention to the indicated area. In that instant of diverted focus, I subtly depressed the small stud on my wristwatch, a panic alert integrated with the estate's security network. I prayed for its silent operation, a digital SOS launched into the night. "Nothing," he growled after several fruitless minutes, spinning back towards me, fury contorting his masked face. "You're stalling." I retreated, hands raised placatingly. "No, truly I thought I recalled." He lunged, seizing my arm with bruising force. "Enough. Show me the vault now, or..." His threat died, strangled by the sudden ear-splitting shriek of sirens erupting throughout the mansion. Crimson strobes painted the walls in frantic pulses as an automated voice declared, coolly precise, "Security breach detected. Authorities have been notified. All exits are now sealed." A vicious curse escaped him. Shoving me aside, he bolted for the closet door, yanking futilely at the handle. It held fast. The house had become our shared prison. What ensued was a terrifying inversion of childhood games. Trapped and exposed, the intruder became a cornered animal, desperation fueling a frantic search for egress while simultaneously hunting his only witness. In the ensuing chaos, I managed to slip away, melting into a secret passage, a quirk of architecture discovered during my earlier, more innocent explorations. Concealed in utter darkness, I listened to his enraged movements, the sounds of destruction echoing through the house as he vented his fury. Tears tracked silently down my face as I huddled, praying for the swift arrival of flashing blue lights. An age passed in suffocating darkness before new sounds intruded. Authoritative shouts, the sharp percussion of shattering glass. Deliverance, finally. When the ordeal concluded, I emerged, trembling but physically intact. The intruder, apprehended amidst the wreckage, was revealed as part of an organized syndicate specializing in affluent residences. The Ashworths, it transpired, possessed a collection of artifacts of immense value, secured within the very vault whose location remained a mystery to me. In the subsequent days, punctuated by police statements and the slow processing of trauma, the violation lingered. The house, once a symbol of sanctuary and privilege, now felt tainted, hostile. The Ashworths, distant voices on the phone, offered profuse apologies, a substantial bonus, and effusive references. Yet the allure of house-sitting had irrevocably soured. The experience laid bare a fundamental vulnerability, the fragility of security even within fortress walls. Years have spun away, yet the phantom creak of a floorboard, the peripheral flicker of an unidentifiable shadow, remain unwelcome nocturnal companions. Fear, once confronted, leaves an indelible residue, but vigilance became my unwelcome inheritance, a constant awareness of thresholds and the spaces beyond them. For sometimes, the gravest dangers are not those breaking down the door, but the unseen currents we inadvertently invite across our own sills. Our most reliable defenses, ultimately, reside within. Instinct, awareness, the capacity for decisive action in the face of the unthinkable.